So we are live on Voice America Radio and Unchained TV, the global streaming network for veganism and animal rights, talking to Alex Cragun, who is the Director of Government Affairs for Mercy for Animals, about a very, very serious crisis right now. The Northeast of the United States is in a crisis with 6 feet of snow in some places. And yet these poor animals, these pigs and these cows and these chickens and these turkeys are being transported in open air trucks, sometimes freezing to death, dying of hypothermia, and even getting stuck on the freeway, freezing to death. Who is looking out for them? Mercy for Animals is. Alex, tell us why this is such a crucial campaign, particularly right now.
Jane, first of all, thank you so much for having me on today. And with regards to animal transport, you're right, it's absolutely atrocious. More than 20 million animals die every year on transport. There's an article in Guardian earlier this year. The conditions are absolutely horrendous. There's no appropriate spacing with regards to species. So folks are there, the animals are crammed packed. They're not able to turn around. They're not able to lay down. They don't have access to food or water while in transport, and they don't have that access to climate control. And here we are right now. It's late November. Folks are seeing a lot of snow in the Northeast, as you mentioned earlier. I live out here in the West, and we get a lot of snow, especially around the I-80 corridor. And frankly, it's atrocious, and there's something needs to happen. And so that's why Mercy for Animals has put out together a petition to encourage folks to sign on to that would direct and calling on the USDA and the Department of Transportation to put together rulemaking, putting together standards with regards to animal transport here in the United States. It's long overdue, and we would encourage folks to go to mercyforanimals.org/transport, sign on that petition, share it with your friends, share it with your family. I know that Thanksgiving is coming up, and it's a great opportunity to get the word out to folks in the community.
Yes, and here is the Mercy for Animals call to action. Tell the USDA to update archaic animal transport regulations. And all you have to do is go to mercyforanimals.org/transport, and you will see the easy way. I signed it before coming on today, and it takes literally 5 seconds to send this message to the United States Department of Agriculture and the Department of Transportation to say, dear God, I mean, what kind of society are we when we can allow animals to literally freeze to death on the freeway? What kind of society, morally bankrupt society, are we that we can stick sentient beings, and pigs are, for example, more intelligent than dogs, and pack them into crowded trailers and put them on the freeway when there are snowstorms, and they literally arrive at the slaughterhouse frozen to death in some cases? And, just for those who think, well, is she exaggerating? Check this out from CNN.
Winds of up to 30 miles per hour could produce heavy snow at a rate of 2 to 3 inches per hour. While some travel bans have been lifted, many still remain in place.
That makes sense. Authorities have written more than 400 citations for drivers breaking the travel ban. Stay off the roads, guys. They've also say they've towed dozens of vehicles stuck on the side of the road or involved in accidents because of the snow, hence the travel ban. Snowfall totals of more than 6 feet have been recorded in 2 locations. That is according to the National Weather Service.
So ask yourself, would you want to be driven in an outdoor truck with no defense against? And here's some video, and I know a lot of people are listening on Voice America Radio, but let me tell you, these are metal trucks. We know that metal carries cold. They're packed in there. They're wedged where they're against the metal, and they literally freeze and they experience hypothermia. I mean, this is barbaric. It is barbaric. So my question is, Do you think, Alex, that the United States Department of Agriculture, which is run by a dairy industry trade group leader, is listening? In other words, I mean, if they cared, this would not require anybody to tell them this. I mean, this is pretty obvious. There's a extreme weather crisis in the Northeast. This is what these animals are transported in: open air, wind whipping in, 30-mile-an-hour winds in some cases, whipping into these trucks. And it doesn't take brain surgery to know that that is essentially amounting to torture. So why
Mhm.
do we have to even tell the USDA, which is unfortunately uh, burdened with a conflict of interest? They're supposed to watch out for farmed animals, but they're also supposed to promote the meat and dairy industry, which they do. So obviously, corporate interests are far more powerful than the animals who cannot speak for themselves. That's why we've got Mercy for Animals there. But why do we even need to tell them this?
That's a good question. So there's a number of reasons. Like one, there haven't been a lot of examples of enforcement around this. There are no like set out rules and regulations with regard to how that enforcement is put into place, and so that's why we're putting this petition together. Why we're going and encourage people to sign on and to get them to do, because once we release these to public comment, and then they get those in their inbox and they're able to review that, and they take that into consideration, and then they move into like, well, what are our next steps? Are we going to look at this? Are we not going to? They have to give us some sort of like response as a part of that. When that is, I'm not quite sure that that's up to their timeline there, but that's why we're trying to get as many folks as we can to issue a statement, because like as you mentioned earlier, the industrial animal agriculture, factory farming, they have a lot of lobbyists, they have a lot of interest, and so it's up to us as members of the community, as citizens, as residents of the United States, to go and sign on and make sure that we're having our voice heard. And the best way to do that is by signing petitions, things like this. There's the particular rule. It's called the 28-hour rule, 28-hour law. And basically, the USDA and the federal government allows for animals to be in these sort of confined situations without access to climate control for up to 28 hours, which is like I can barely sit in a car for 4 hours and I've got the AC or the heater on. I can't even imagine the misery and horror that comes with having to sit in a confined space without the ability to lay down, without the ability to move around, without the ability to keep myself warm in these sort of trailers, and being, they're absolutely filthy. Like you have animals sitting there, things are going to happen. Like the body processes things, and having to sort of like walk around in that is absolutely filthy and atrocious. And they deserve better. And Americans need to go and voice your concerns about this by signing on to petitions like this and getting involved in that process.
Yeah. So Gina DeVito says, what can we do? Well, you can sign this petition. It's very easy. You literally go to mercyforanimals.org. That's the website /transport. And there is a petition there that is extremely easy to sign. You'll see this. You scroll down, you put your name in, boom, it takes 5 seconds. And
Mm-hmm.
how many signatures are you looking for?
As many as we can. Last I checked, I believe it's at least 8,000, but it grows every day. People are signing on a regular basis, and that's why we're here today, is to encourage folks to continue to sign on, to share it with their family members, share it with your friends on your social network. You got Thanksgiving coming up. That's always, as a vegan, it's always a really sort of like engaging opportunity to talk to family members about, the impact of factory farming has on our planet, has on the animals, has on workers, and how we can push for a better system. Our mission here at Mercy for Animals is to end the industrial animal agriculture system, and to reform our food system to be more just and sustainable, right? And so this is one aspect, one way, one approach to sort of meet that mission, is to get USDA, get the Department of Transportation on board, sitting together, talking about this issue, and developing realistic and enforceable mechanisms for this atrocity when it comes to animals and their well-being. What's even worse is like we as a country don't have a really solid infrastructure around this. There are only 5 places here in the United States, and we're a fairly large country, right, where in which animals are able to be unboarded from these transport vehicles, get access to water, get access to food, have access to shelter and rest. And we need to do more. More needs to happen as a country.
So one of the comments here, where are they transporting them?
Typically, this is where they're going from, wherever they were being farmed at to the slaughterhouse, unfortunately. But they also might be going from one place to another. But this is typically where when we're talking about transport, that's what that means. So they're going, and they're essentially their final hours of life are. I mean, the conditions in which animals are being farmed are already atrocious and awful. But to put on top of that they have to spend this amount of time in these abhorrent conditions just adds to the additional pain and suffering.
Wow. So you're looking at, and those who are listening, just imagine these pigs and these other animals going into the slaughterhouse, never to come out. You can hear their screams on the outside of the slaughterhouse. I actually recorded this video myself, and I got to tell you, it is really brutal, really, really brutal to be there and observe these little faces looking at you. And basically, they're babies. Pigs are slaughtered when they're approximately 6 months old. They're babies, and they're looking at you and they're saying, "What's happening? What's happening to me?" And I'll just show you, the photos that I personally took at a slaughterhouse. And I got to say that it is so gut wrenching. And then to add onto that horror, the idea that it's so cold that they are going to, my gosh, freeze to death. No, there is something very fundamentally wrong with our society, and we are going to pay the price. And folks are saying they are sharing out. Nilafar has said she's signed and sharing out with many people. Thank you, Nilafar. And we've got a caller, Sarah from Atlanta. Your question or thought for Alex of Mercy for Animals.
Hi, I have a question. For people that are going to the grocery store and they don't know about these animals freezing, is there a way that you can show people at the grocery store, like the pictures that are on there now? Is there a way to pass a law that could be illegal because they should maybe show how they got on the package? Like, I know it says like humane and stuff, but don't you think they should know like about them freezing to death, how they got there before? I mean, I don't know. It just seems really mixed messages, and it's confusing to the consumers. I feel like this is a consumer issue all the way around. Thank you.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a good point. And like there should be better and more transparency with regards to how long animals are spending on transport and the conditions of that. Whether or not that be part of a labeling issue, that would be something I'd want to talk to my colleagues about. But that's something that Congress would have to look at, right? They would be the ones that would be writing that law. And there might be like I'd have to check about with regards to USDA and seeing if there's anything they have in their authority there on that issue. But thank you.
All right. Yes. And we've got more comments coming in. Well, certainly, yes, this sets it all. So sad. And Debbie Kellerman says, well, even if they didn't freeze to death, the point is they're still going to be slaughtered. No animal should die for any human to eat. We do not need to survive to eat animal products. And yes, they often die. This would strike me just from a cold calculated perspective, from the industry perspective. It's not smart to let these animals suffer to this point on the way to slaughter. I don't know if an animal freezes to death in transport, do they still take that body in and chop it up and sell it?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Sorry. Oh, no, they don't. Unfortunately, they don't. Because it's it would be considered condemned. That animal would be condemned, so they would not be into the system ideally. Like that, there are issues there, but regardless of the fact that they froze to death, that is an absolutely miserable end of life moment, and that again, there should be better ways of ensuring that they have access to appropriate spacing, access to water, access to food, and access to climate control. Some of just the bare necessities. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the idea of going and being in this sort of weather that you're experiencing in the Northeast without access to a heater and without access to sort of any sort of like insulation, it's just atrocious. And it's barbaric. Like we can do better as a society. At the very least, the least that we can do.
We've got another caller, Michael in Los Angeles. Your question or thought for Alex Cragun, Mercy for Animals Director of Government Affairs.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, great. This is really frustrating for me. I've, this has been going on for so long, and I don't actually see it getting any better. It's actually getting worse as far as like how animals are treated. It's just unbelievable. It's like you said, Jane, it's a crime. And I just wanted to ask, your guest, Alex, if there been any signs of progress, any sign to give us hope that things will change in the future, in the past few years, and anything gotten better? I just want to know, just so you can give me some kind of hope.
Yeah, no, I think that there are a lot of like opportunities out there. One, this petition, going and engaging with the USDA on this is a good first sort of like aspect of the step. But there's also, we have what they refer to as the Farm Bill that's coming up. That happens every 5 years. It's a law, sort of a piece of legislation that deals with the operations of the USDA. And this is something that Mercy for Animals is interested in being involved in. That's much as I can say here at the moment. Well, I'd say, stay tuned, keep involved, be sure to sign on to our newsletter. But that is one way in which we can look at these things, is to address them either through the Farm Bill or through subsequent legislation or through working with the USDA. There are a number of fronts that we can be looking at this issue.
Now, always I try to find a silver lining in whatever horror, because otherwise we would just throw up our hands and go, oh my God. But this is, with extreme weather increasing as a result of climate change, tragically, this is going to happen more and more frequently. And of course, the industry calls it supply chain disruption. You heard in the CNN report, they were saying that there was a ban in some areas on traveling. So it's going to become harder and harder for animal agriculture to operate in a world of extreme weather. Meanwhile, we have all sorts of new bioidentical meat, cultured meat, all sorts of other products, and of course, vegan products.
Mm-hmm.
Being vegan 26 years, I know you don't need to eat bioidentical meat. You don't need to eat cultured meat. However, for those who are hell-bent on eating their pound of flesh, there are now these alternatives that are coming up. The FDA just did some approvals on cultured meat for the first time. Singapore served cultured chicken, which is basically, it involves no animal cruelty. It's, for example, we just interviewed the head of Atelier Meats. They use placenta and the umbilical cord to create the DNA structure and the cell structure, and no animal is harmed in the making of that. So is this possibly going to accelerate the adoption of cultured meat, clean meat, by the industry as well as the government? Because it doesn't take a brain surgeon to look at this extreme weather. Hurricanes wiping out places like Fort Myers, Florida, extreme weather in the Northeast, fires, floods.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to become virtually impossible to transport billions of animals in transport trucks every year.
No, absolutely, you're right, and I think that alternative proteins, so whether that's your TVPs, your tofu of the world, or whether that's cultured cell meats, it's an all hands on deck, sort of like all approaches way of doing this, because you're right, like climate change is going to affect our weather, our ability for folks to get around, our ability to do commerce in the way we have. done things typically. And so the best thing that we can do is continue to engage on these issues. Talk to your members of Congress about these issues and let them know about it. But also signing on to petitions, going and getting involved, getting to know folks in your community that are doing this sort of work, and also being sure that when opportunities around issues like cultured cell meat that are out there, that from your perspective, that you're raising your voice, you're raising your concerns on these things. I think that as time goes on, the cost of animal-based products will rise, right? And as time goes on and innovation happens, as new technologies are adopted, the cost of plant-based options or cell-based options that don't involve the slaughter of animals will become more affordable. And part of my work, part of the work at Mercy for Animals, is to help accelerate that, make that happen sooner rather than later. Because
All right.
the impact that, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to jump in because we got a whole bunch of callers. So hang in there,
Awesome.
everybody. Let's hit Emick in Los Angeles. Your question or thought for Alex Cragun of Mercy for Animals.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for your life-saving content. We all know that there's no humane meat, there's no humane milk, there's no humane transportation. And I know that none of the people who are giving these orders to do as a business would be in the place of animals. They wouldn't want to live in the farms. They wouldn't want to be in the transport trucks. If we could put them in them for once, the Congress people to the trucks, and force them to travel like the animals, this industry would be over overnight. I'm wondering what you are doing to educate the government. I know that you do a lot to educate the public, but directly, what do you do to educate the government people?
Great question.
Teach them there's no humane way of killing someone.
Great
question.
You. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's a great question. No, part of our work is in going and meeting with elected officials and talking to them about these issues and talking about the problems we're talking about today. For example, animal transport, going and talking about how things could be better and what the authority they have over these issues in particular. But going and sitting down with them and walking through these issues and talking to them and meeting them at their level, right? Going and getting to know like what their background is. And I would encourage folks to do the same for themselves. Like as individuals, if you care about these issues, get informed and become that person, establish a relationship with your member of Congress, establish a relationship with your state elected officials, your city council members, your county council members, being a point of contact on these issues and sort of like being a trusted like local expert on these things is a great way to really engage and help change our current food system from what it is to a more humane, more just a food system.
Well, I have to say, but I want to go to the next caller. I'll jump way in there for a second. Nilafar in Dallas, Texas, your question or thought to Alex Cragun of Mercy for Animals.
Hi. Again, pivoting on Michael's question a bit earlier, it's a bit frustrating because for those of us who have been at it for decades, we see great work by animal protection organizations such as yours. We see one step forward. At the same time, we witness two steps backward because it just seems that there's such a big disconnect between the public and what happens to these sentient beings. And working in Texas has its additional difficulties because these representatives, which I didn't vote for, they just don't give a damn. So, do you have any suggestions for how to redirect the attention to these officials who just don't give a damn?
No, it's a good question. I mean, part of it, this sort of work right here, going and talking to the members of the public, that's one way, right? Because eventually, like a number of the folks here today are going to reach out to their elected officials and let them know about this, and maybe that results in them getting a meeting and sitting down with them. And you're right, it is frustrating. It is very frustrating. And the only thing I can say is to keep at it. We can't. If we step away, if we walk away from this, then we allow for the industrial animal agriculture, the factory farming industry to take the reins on this. If we're not showing up every day, they're going to be the ones showing up. So, you're right. It is absolutely frustrating, and sometimes it feels overwhelming. And what I would recommend is to, what I do, my self care on these issues. I go and I volunteer. I foster for a local humane society, and that for me, like being able to have that individual impact right there is incredibly important. It sort of refills my cup, especially after a really difficult meeting or a really difficult couple of weeks. So if you're feeling like that, like go and spend some time at a sanctuary, go and volunteer. But keep at this. This is incredibly important. If you're interested in doing more of this work, like we reach out to mercyforanimals.org. We have our newsletter. We have an opportunity to volunteer. These are something that we're interested in and we're still developing, but we'd love to talk to you more about it. And then finally, make sure you're signing the petition. Be sure you're connecting with folks and communicating on these things. You're right. I completely understand what you're saying, that frustration, but we can't go into a state of being cynical or going and shutting down, because when we do, then the industry wins.
It always seems darkest before the dawn, and just do the next indicated thing. Stay out of the results. For example, people are saying, what can I do? What can I do? It's very simple. mercyforanimals.org/transport. Just put that into your browser. mercyforanimals.org/transport. It takes 10 seconds to sign. And anytime I get an email from Mercy for Animals, I always click on it because I know they can do it very easily. And we're not in this era where somebody said, where's the petition? I'll sign. Okay, we're going to show one more time. We'll keep showing it throughout this broadcast. mercyforanimals.org/transport. That's the way to go. Take that action. And, my cynicism is about whether they really pay attention to anything aside from a campaign like this. That's why I think these campaigns are so important. The days of writing letters, to your member of Congress and putting in the mail are over. And it's a numbers game, because I've been on the other side and I see how they see it. Yes, if they get a flood of angry phone calls, they pay attention. If they get a campaign where you've got thousands of people signing, they may pay attention. But tell us once again, what do you want the USDA and the Department of Transportation to do?
Good question. And again, we're asking the USDA and the Department of Transportation to establish standards with regards to animal transport. So appropriate spacing for species, ensuring that they have regulations around food and water, and ensuring that there's some sort of process in which folks that are breaking those laws can be potentially held accountable. And there's one other thing. Hang on here. Yeah. Also insurance for rest time, and then protection from extreme temperatures. So not only like what we're experiencing in the Northeast, right? Those extreme colds, but those extreme hots in August and July and September, where animals are going and dying of preventable like hypothermia, so like heat stroke. And it's just absolutely, again, they deserve better. We have the ability to do it. It's time to act now.
Well, we are going to take a very short break on Voice America Radio, but we are going to stay live on Facebook as well as the Unchained TV app. You can watch this on the Unchained TV app, which is our new global streaming network for these kinds of issues, because this should be something that the major news media covers. Okay. Meanwhile, the major news media is putting in their turkey recipes and talking about the rising price of turkey, and never once looking at it from the perspective of these poor animals. Debbie says she just signed. So let's get everybody signing. Everybody who's upset, take action. We will be back in a moment, but we're staying live right here on all the other platforms. So stay with us. We're going to continue the conversation. All right. So thank you for bringing this all together. And I think the work that Mercy for Animals does is incredible. I also want to talk to you. Heather Dahman just said she signed. So we're getting people signing. I also want to talk to you about the Farm Bill, because a lot of this wouldn't even be happening if our government wasn't subsidizing animal agriculture to the tune of many, many, many billions of dollars every year. And indeed, if these animals do die of frostbite or hypothermia or hyperthermia, isn't it considered like a write-off for them because there's government insurance for animal agriculture, which is obscene? That not only am I and other taxpayers forced to subsidize this industry that is contributing mightily to climate change, habitat destruction, wildlife extinction, human world hunger, and preventable lifestyle human diseases. But then when the industry behaves recklessly and these animals die left and right, they get an insurance write-off. So they have no incentive to improve the conditions.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And like part of so with the farm bill, it's once every 5 years. It's very sort of extensive, very large bill, and there's a lot of opportunities to really reform the food system. And I think a lot of folks aren't aware of those insurance policies, those sort of like standards and regulations that benefit the industrial animal agriculture like industry. And part of our work is going and educating folks about that, but also going and building coalitions, going and developing relationships with organizations that aren't necessarily directly aligned in this, but are nevertheless impacted, right? I'm talking labor unions, folks that are, on the front lines on these issues that are impacted by this, talking about the environmental movement. They're aware of things like the oil industry and the impact the oil industry has on climate change, but are folks aware about what factory farming does to our environment, as well as to with regards to CO2 emissions and climate change, and getting them on board. And so like if you, again, I think the most important thing that folks can be doing is having broader conversations about the shared values around sort of the unjust, the inhumaneness, the cruelty, and the just unsustainability of factory farming here in the United States, and how we as a society need to come together to reform this and to build a better, more just system.
All right. And for people who are still asking, where can we sign the petition? It's right here. Now I've edited this to say, sign the petition at mercyforanimals.org/transport. And I believe we are coming back in a second to Voice America Radio. So Unchained TV, meanwhile, while we're getting ready to start up on Voice America Radio, which is also broadcast all over iTunes and Amazon Music, etc., we are a global streaming network for the plant-based lifestyle, for human health, for animals, and for climate change. And we have about, now I spent this morning uploading more videos. We have about 1,000 videos right now, and we are also live now. So we're live on our streaming app. And the idea is for people around the world looking for free content, because we're a nonprofit, we're absolutely free to get this content. We're going to come back to Voice America Radio right now.
The Voice America Influencers Channel.
Welcome back to Unchained TV on Voice America Radio. I'm Jane Velez-Mitchell, and you are now re-entering a portal to a transformative way of living. And we are talking to Alex Cragun of Mercy for Animals, the Director of Government Affairs. I also want to ask you about the Farm Bill, because so much of this wouldn't be happening if we weren't, us taxpayers, forced to subsidize this industry that is destroying the planet. We talk about the Amazon. 70% of the Amazon that is being destroyed for cattle grazing. Who are the consumers? American consumers. So people go, it's terrible that we're destroying the Amazon. Well, look in the mirror, okay? Look in the mirror as to why this is being destroyed. It's because people are going to the supermarket and picking up a slab of meat. And just today, I read a very negative article in the New York Times about plant-based meats. And I just was like, oh my God, carnist media, let's wake up, because it's not good for anybody's business if it's too hot to walk outside. I read an article about how UPS workers and other delivery people are fainting in the summertime because it's too hot. It's too hot to transport animals, or it's too cold to transport animals. The weather is becoming increasingly extreme due to climate change, and this is just the appetizer. It's going to get exponentially worse. Not me saying this. Look at Breaking Boundaries. Sir David Attenborough has done this incredible documentary. No radical activist Sir David Attenborough, Breaking Boundaries. I believe it's on Netflix. We are breaking boundaries that once you break through them, there's no going back. And one of the key drivers of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, methane emissions, is animal agriculture. And yet people don't talk about it. And now the animals are suffering again, doubly exponentially by being forced to be transported in this extreme weather. Why is it that otherwise intelligent people, the best and the brightest, which by the way was a sarcastic title, the best and the brightest brought us the quagmire, the Vietnam War. Why is it that these people, particularly in government, are they just looking 2 years ahead so they can get reelected and they can't see the big picture?
So I think it's a combination of things. One, they are focused. The 2-year election cycle is drastically sort of like prohibitive when it comes to being able to develop policies while also trying to effectively get elected to office, right? That is an issue with regards to our democracy, our democratic republic, whatever you want to call it. Another one is folks aren't as connected to their food system as they were. The Humane Methods of Slaughter Act was passed in, 1958. That was over 70 years ago. And folks, as time has gone on and the industry has consolidated, that aspect of sort of what the farmed animal existence has been further sort of isolated from everyday consumers. And so they're not aware. So they have to rely on labeling and information that's provided by the industry. And some of those have specific outlines that are regulated by the USDA and others don't. And so there's a lot of confusion there. And so one thing that can be addressed on this is the Farm Bill, as you mentioned earlier. And, folks that are in Congress, they can develop pieces of legislation that could be eventually adopted into the Farm Bill itself, something that we're very interested in. So I would encourage folks, be aware that the next year and a half, there's a lot of opportunity to really engage on this particular issue. So if you're interested in getting more involved, to learn about these things, go to mercyforanimals.org. One, again, transport, sign that petition, sign up for our newsletter, and get involved with your local community organization on these issues, because it's going to take all of us to really change the system. And it's not just, folks who are involved in the animal welfare and animal rights community. It also involves the labor community. Folks that are working in this industry are exploited. They are treated terribly. And it requires, collaboration with them in order to make that sort of change. It requires environmental groups, getting them on board. They are looking at things from the fossil fuels perspective, or trying to find renewable, greener alternatives to the fossil fuel industry. But they also need to be talking about issues related to factory farming. But they don't have that pressure. So going and engaging with them, getting involved with them, talking to them about that issue, trying to shift that conversation is one way of going about doing this. For myself, what I'm envisioning is a growing of a coalition, bringing folks together wherever they come from, and getting them on board with the idea of a more just and humane food system.
All right, we've got yet another caller. This is a hot topic, and we've got Annie in Los Angeles. Your question or thought for Alex Cragun of Mercy for Animals.
Hello, thank you for having me on, and thank you for having Alex. You do an amazing job, Mercy for Animals. I love you. I highly recommend everybody to sign the petitions anytime you see it. One of the things that really bothers me is that the undermining or taking our words, saying everything is being done humanely. What else can we do? Because the laws are not changing. I know you've talked about every kind of thing happening, but the frustrating aspect of this is when we do protest, when we try to awaken people, we seem that we are not able to connect to people for them to understand that these animals are no different than the dogs and the cats that they are loving. It's very frustrating, and the laws are not changing. And that is the thing that I feel that we are really weakened by, because the system itself is supporting our own taxes. Sometimes I even say that the money we're paying, the 50 billion plus that is going towards the subsidy every year from our pocket, why don't they give us, let's put a clause in the law that my tax is paying money for you to murder animals, right? 200 to 300 a year. Give me those animals alive. Can we do something like that? Try and break it down to them that if you're taking my tax money, which you are, without my desire, Give me the animals that you are going to murder with my money on my behalf, because I'm not going to eat those animals. I want them alive. And if so many of us do that, maybe they will understand the volume of the animals that are being killed and the money that's going to be. We should have a voice over what's happening, basically. Maybe that's the way to go. Maybe that's something that we could do. Because every method we try, grassroots and everything, I would love to reach millions of people. We reach so many. My little fur baby, Chanel Champ, she is an animal mascot. She reaches out to so many. But the sheer number of animals killed, sheer number of people that are blinded to the reality is really overwhelming.
Thank you
Can we
so much.
approach?
Yes, I think it's an excellent question. Thank you, Annie from LA. We're going to take it back to Alex Cragun of Mercy for Animals.
No, I think that's a very interesting idea. I don't have a background in tax policy, so I can't speak to that. But that's an interesting idea. Something that folks should look at further. But regardless, I would challenge that it is frustrating that change takes time, and we have to sort of keep at this sort of pressure. We can't back away. Like, again, as I mentioned earlier, like, the best way to make this happen is by going and engaging with folks on an ongoing basis and identifying folks that are in your community that are involved, that are impacted by this, and developing relationships with them, right? Developing coalition work. That, to me, I think, is the most critical aspect of this. Going and discussing that sort of aspect, as you mentioned earlier, like with regards to cats and dogs and the intelligence level, going and talking to folks about that, because they don't really know, right? Folks aren't just generally aware, because culture has taught everybody that chickens are dumb, that pigs are live in squalid conditions. Pigs are absolutely one of the brightest animals out there. They're incredibly insightful, and they deserve dignity and respect, as do chickens, as do all animals. And I would encourage you to go and sort of like introduce them, start to have that conversation, develop those relationships, keep engaged. We cannot throw up our hands on these issues, because if we do, then the industry will just win and will continue to be where we are today.
We've got another caller, Tom in Chicago. Your question or thought?
Hello, thank you for taking my call. My question was, Jane had brought it up earlier, where these people would rather collect the insurance money than save the animals. I remember a few years back during a hurricane, they let these animals drown without any attempt to rescue them. My question was, these trucks are just sheet metal trucks, okay? They're just as bad in summer as they are in wintertime. Would insurance companies ever require these operators to have like air conditioning and heating for these trucks year round? It seems like they're paying out this money. They'd rather let the animals die than try to save them. Why isn't the insurance company stepping in here and telling these farmers and drivers and so forth to have controlled temperature trucks to transport these animals? Thank you so much for taking my call. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
No, that's good. That's a great question. And actually, I'm going to go and do some research on that, Tom. I don't have an answer for you there, but I will. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. And, here's my idea, because there are like six companies now that control the entire industry. I mean, we got Tyson, we got JBS, we got Smithfield, they're a handful. You can count them on your hand. And it's also becoming harder for them. We see that prices are going up because of supply chain disruptions, and it's largely due to nature telling us something you're doing here, people, is really bad. So we had the pandemic, which, of course, there were controversies about it, but the New York Times itself in February published an article that said, scientific community has said, in all likelihood, the evidence is overwhelming that it started at a wet market. Okay. It may, we don't know. We can never know. Just like you can never know in a criminal trial, if you didn't have the cameras rolling, exactly what happened. But there's a very likely probability that it started in the wet market, as previous pandemics have started in other wet markets. So you have that. You have climate change with the extreme weather. I mean, nature is trying to send us a message. What you're doing with industrialized animal agriculture is not working. And is there a way to approach the executives of this industry, since you could probably say that you could fit everybody in one room who runs all these companies, and just say, look, it's going to get worse for you with every passing year with climate change. Why don't we switch now to cultured meat? Why don't we just do that switch now because the clock is ticking? We only have a few years. We can't talk to everybody one-on-one. There are now 8 billion people on the planet. We understand that governments have been co-opted by industry. We understand even the United Nations has been, in some respects, co-opted by industry. They're still serving meat at their climate conferences. So, as Claire Smith of the Vegan ETF, VEGN, said, we simply have to make cruelty-free more profitable than cruelty. There is a way for them to make vast sums of money with all of these different variations on cultured meat. You have bioidentical meat being created by a company called Paleo in Belgium. We interviewed that scientist who runs that company. He's a former member of the parliament, I believe, in Belgium. He was a political leader of some sort. You have microalgae production happening in Israel. You've got Atelier Meats using placenta and the umbilical cord of cows, absolutely cruelty-free, cultured meat based on that. I mean, there are all of these alternatives. Why do we have to wait for 10 years or 15 years, just like the electric car could have been in the 1990s? There's a great documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car? Because they killed the electric car and they didn't transition. We had to wait 30 years. Now everybody wants electric cars. Everybody makes a comparison between electric cars and the meat industry, but we don't have 30 years. We've got to do a shortcut. Is there a way for Mercy for Animals to get these people in a room and say, it's not good business if the planet is toast?
That's a good question. I can't say for certain that we can get all those folks in there, but we can certainly, I know we do a lot of corporate engagement. We try and work with companies to commit to better and higher welfare standards. Whether we could do that sort of like transformative change, that would require a lot of folks other than just ourselves. Like it would require like a coalition, a community to get them to sit down and to discuss this. But I also think, again, for myself, this is where the policy comes into play. A lot of some of our major shifts in society are the result of government action and government investment. And so going and investing and making the conscientious sort of decision that we're going to look at this further and that we're going to try and improve society in this particular direction, in this particular way, funding this particular program. That's something that Congress can do. And that's something that the administration can do. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this petition, right? Going and encouraging the USDA, the Department of Transportation, to rule out, sort of to establish standards that are with regards to the 28-hour law. That's why we're very interested and intrigued on like opportunity to engage on things like the Farm Bill, as well as other legislation at the federal level as well as the state level. You know, we're trying to go and do this at every level of government that we possibly can. There are other organizations that are doing the same thing as well. And what my hope is to sort of build together sort of this a feasible sort of like working coalition of organizations and folks in the community, build a top-down and a bottom-up strategy on this so we can make address the issues of climate change, address the issues of the cruelties in our food system in a meaningful way and in a way that is sooner rather than later. That being said, all change is a marathon and not a sprint here in the United States. That's one of the frustrating things that we have here.
All right. And do we still have Paige on hold from Los Angeles?
All
right.
right. Yes, I'm calling in. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You know, I just got an email from Mercy for Animals about the volunteer virtual orientation. So I just want to let callers know out there and viewers that, you know, you can get involved by clicking on their website and find out ways that you can also engage. My question is, how do we work with farmers to let them know that this is a dying industry, meat, dairy, and eggs and fish, and to bring them into the plant world? We need these farmers who know their land to bring more plants onto, you know, their farms. So what are your thoughts on that? And thank you so much.
No, I would say that there are a number of farmers that are aware of that. You know, they folks that are farming animals. You know, they live on thin margins. They don't make a lot of money. Most of the money that is made is part of the integrators, like the folks that are sort of like that condensed aspect of the industry. And we have a great program at Mercy for Animals that we work with Transformation that go and work with those farmers that want to transition away from farmed animals to something like growing mushrooms, growing hemp, growing other vegetables and fruits, rather than simply going and continuing what they've been doing. Because as a result of that, a number of farmers are in, deep in debt, and they have no real opportunity to get out of that sort of arrangement. And so going and finding those folks, finding ways to sort of move them away from that debt and investing into a sustainable, more environmentally friendly, more plant-based focus that doesn't involve the exploitation of animals.
Yeah. So this is all so amazing, because I will say this: Mercy for Animals is big enough that you could form that coalition, and you do so much work with transformation and working in the halls of Congress, which is so important. So we only have a couple of minutes. I have two quick questions. Where does the Farm Bill stand? In other words, in terms of changing those subsidies so that there's more subsidies going to fruits, vegetables, nuts, and grains that humans eat, as opposed to ginormous commodity crops that are consumed by farmed animals.
Yeah. So the answer there is, come 2023, we'll start seeing those initial conversations rolling out in Congress. They don't plan on addressing that until the new Congress comes in. And so over the next year, it could be longer. The previous Farm Bill took more than a year to get developed, but that will be a larger conversation. There'll be things called marker bills. They're sort of like designed to be standalone legislation. They're potentially could be included or adopted into that Farm Bill. And there are there likely going to be legislation out there that will address some of the issues that Mercy for Animals and other organizations are interested in to potentially adopt into that. And then, just long term, going and developing that larger grassroots movement, because it's going to take multiple farm bills for us to be able to effectively go and get our government to shift away from the current incentives, the current sort of aspects of the USDA into a better, more humane, more just sort of food system focus.
Just to interrupt you, because we only have 2 minutes, you say there's multiple farm bills, but it renews, like it's renewing in 2023, and then it's there for quite a while.
Yeah, so it'll be one in 2023, but there will also be an opportunity in 2028. That's the nature of.
I'm not gonna be around in 2028.
Yeah, no, I know. I
mean, we've got to get this farm bill, and from what people told me is that, of course, the other side is working with their lobbyists right now to protect themselves. I wonder. And please, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I appreciate everything you're doing, and I'm a massive, massive fan of Mercy for Animals. But just the fact that I get to talk to you is so exciting. Do you reach out to people like, for example, Bill Gates, one of the largest or the largest private landowner, mostly farmed animals? He's also invested in meat alternatives, plant-based alternatives, etc. He would be a perfect person to. He's even said we need to go into synthetic meat and soon.
No, I can't say that I've reached out to Bill Gates, but if someone has some contact information, happy to talk to him about it. No, but going and finding folks that are interested in this and engaged on this issue, that are informed, that have that sort of sway. That is one thing that I'm very interested in learning, engaging in. We already have the folks that we know existingly and that we're trying to engage on these issues. But if folks are interested in connecting with other people, let me know. Happy to hear from them. Happy to hear from you.
The main thing, our main point today is sign this petition. mercyforanimals.org/transport. If you're upset by what's happening, it's a very easy way. It takes literally less than 10 seconds. I signed the petition right before this show, and it takes less than 10 seconds. You just go to mercyforanimals.org/transport, and you can also share out this video. And you can actually go to UnchainedTV. It's on the app now. We are streaming now live on our global streaming network, and you can share the share button on this video out on Twitter, on Facebook, all across social media. So we're giving you the tools to be able to spread the word about this issue on as many platforms as possible. And I just want to say, we have about 30 seconds. Thank you, Alex, for everything you do. You are an inspiration. I know you're a very busy person. Thank you for taking an hour to talk to us today. And please let us know how we can help you, because we're huge fans of Mercy for Animals, Leah Garces, as well as Milo Runkle, who I know for many years. They're amazing people. They're doing amazing work. Your team is fantastic. Everybody support Mercy for Animals. They are just knocking it out of the park. One of the most effective animal organizations on the planet.
Jane, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you all, Annie, Tom, others that came in and provided comment. Great insight. And again, I'd encourage folks, sign the petition, sign up to our newsletter, keep involved, and we can do this. Thank you.
All right. See you next time on Voice America Radio and Unchained TV. Thank you, everyone.